All right. Today we're going to be learning about how to write an introduction for your rhetorical analysis essay, and we'll be continuing with Elizabeth Minkle's essay, Too Hard to Cheat in the Internet Age. First thing I want to point out is that for your rhetorical analysis essay, you are essentially just analyzing the rhetorical devices the author uses to make an effective or ineffective argument. So you'd be saying they make effective appeals to pathos or ineffective appeals to logos or whatever, and show how that helps or hurts the author's argument. You will not be inserting your opinions about what the author thinks. So you won't be agreeing or disagreeing with the author. You just be analyzing what they do to make their argument work or not work. Okay, uh, so the first thing we're going to do is learn how to make a title for your rhetorical analysis essay. It's really simple. It's 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 formulaic. It's not original. It's boring, but it'll be worth 5 points on your paper, and I'll have a rubric for you can look at. So here is the gist of it. Use the author's full name with an apostrophe because it's a possessive. You include the article's name, and they'll be in quotation marks, double quotes at the end and the beginning, followed by a colon, followed by a rhetorical analysis. Boom, that's your title. 5 easy points for you. Okay, and then you make sure it's centered, which you can do by clicking this, or you can, if you have a PC, just click Control E. And then we can begin our introduction. So your introduction is going to consist of, is going to present the topic and purpose of the analysis and establish the main points and ideas and or themes that will be focused on. And here is essentially the structure of your introduction. You'll have your first sentence, which you've all done pretty well in your summaries. You're going to make sure it includes the author's full name, the title of the article in quotation marks again, and the article's main thesis and argument. The last one will be your thesis, and you'll have that thesis after you've done your rhetorical analysis body paragraphs, and we've covered that a little bit already too. So basically what you have to do is just fill in between those two sentences. You will have a section of your introduction will be about summaries and claims of reasons, which would be like the summary you wrote before, but maybe a little more condensed. But then you'll also include information about the publication, its medium, and when it was released. And you can often you can find out about the publication by going to that publication's website, and they usually have an about section, so you can learn about the journal. Or you can just Google it, maybe go to Wikipedia and find out little information about the medium. So you want to make sure that the article is in the right medium, or maybe it was in the wrong medium. For instance, Minkle's essay is in the New Yorker, which seems to be the perfect place to put it because that's the type of audience who'd be interested in plagiarism and the internet. Those are the type of readers who are interested in culture and arts and politics, and they as opposed to maybe the National Enquirer, because if you read the National Enquirer, no one's going to want to care about plagiarism, right? So you want to talk about how that publication is helping or hurting the author's essay. And that can just be pretty brief, and I'll show you how to do that in a minute too. You also want to establish the writer's credibility, whether they're credible or not to talk on this topic. Some of that information can be found in that front matter information right before the essay, or you can again Google to see who the author is. And then you're going to tell us who you think the intended audience is. And that's going to be after you to figure out who it is, and you can probably pretty much figure that out after you've learned these two things. And you can then, and also you can also figure it out by reading the article. We had that first essay we read, which was kind of casual, so that kind of reader, that audience would be more of a person who's just likes science or whatever, but is not really, doesn't know all the scientific terms. It's meant for a general public with interest in science, right? Hinkle's essay is more along the lines of people who are interested in education, right? So it's going to be aimed at professors, maybe students, people who have interest in education or whatever, right? So again, so you wouldn't have, like, I don't know, someone who reads Sports Illustrated a lot is not going to want to be interested in this content. So you figure out who the audience is based on the journal. All right, so that's kind of what we have to do here. So we have our title up here, and then here is our body paragraph, or our introductory paragraph. So the first thing we're going to do is what we've done before, is do that first sentence. It's simple and easy, it's formulaic, and we just write something like this. Elizabeth Minkles, that's the author's name, right? We have the author. Too hard not to cheat in the internet age, that's the article. And then we're going to get to the thesis and main argument. Is a counter response to a New York Times article, Plagiarism Lines Blur for Students in a Digital Age, which claims the internet is to blame for students who plagiarize, whereas Minkle argues that ignorance is to blame. So it's kind of a long sentence because we have to mention that it's a response to something else. Usually you can just be like, Elizabeth Minkle's essay is too hard not to cheat in an internet age, argues that ignorance is to blame. Something like that, right? It can be a lot simpler and shorter. But we have to include here some information about what she is responding to. So now we've got the main idea and main argument of her paper. Now what we have to do is summarize some of her main claims that she used to support that. So you go back through your essay and you find the main places where she makes her big claims to support her larger thesis statement. So this is what I wrote here. Minkle begins by introducing us to the argument in plagiarism, lines blur for students in the digital age, and then she begins to disprove the argument by showing the flaws in the article's logic and examples, and by bringing in her personal experience of college teachers educating her on the aspects of plagiarism. And she does this in order to highlight the idea that students need to be taught what plagiarism is and how to avoid it, and to not blame the internet. So where does this begin? Okay, so what I did here is I talk about how the introduction of it, because this is a response to something else, we have to show what she was responding to and talk about that. So I just told her she begins her essay by introducing us to what the other person's argument was, right? And then we show how she goes about disproving it by showing flaws in the author's logic. She uses her own examples from her own personal experience, and then why she did that in order to highlight why the other author in his or her article is wrong. So basically, those are the main claims. I think those are the main claims. Maybe you can find some more. Maybe you add some, take some out, whatever you want to do. Just whatever you think the main claims are that support that author's thesis statement. Okay, so we've done the summary, and this section can go in any order you want, whatever you think flows best. But you have to have all this information in here. So we've summarized the main claims and reasons. And now what we want to do is talk about, we want some contextual information and background so your reader has some information, more information about, so they can be situated to understand what the article's about. So basically what you're doing in this introduction is introducing your reader to an article they have not read and maybe will never read. They just want to know about the article. So you're just informing them really briefly. It's kind of like when someone asks you, what was the movie about? And so you tell them what the movie's about. And when you were talking about a movie, you would probably say whether it was like, what type of genre movie was it? Was it a horror movie, sci-fi movie, rom-com, whatever it is. So that's kind of what you're going to be doing in this little section of the introduction. Is you're going to be talking about the medium, the author's credibility, and the audience. So I wrote this. Minkle is a cultural writer for many journals, including the New Yorker, and has an MA in Digital Humanities. I pulled that right from the Front Matter, this MA in Digital Humanities. Some of this information I got was from the Front Matter as well as just looking on the internet about who she was. So she has an MA in Digital Humanities. So she is clearly knowledgeable about education, the internet, and how they interact, because that's what the Digital Humanities is. It's about essentially digital, internet, and education. So we established some credibility for the author. Now we're going to move into the publication of the medium. Her article appears in a 2000 edition of the New Yorker. I didn't know which issue it was, so I just put a edition. But the most important part is we got 2010. Her article appears in a 2010 edition of the New Yorker, a well-respected printed periodical that shares many of the same readers of the New York Times. So here I've kind of talked a little bit about the journal. I said it's printed. And I've talked a little bit about the audience. They share some of the same readers as the New York Times. In addition, the New Yorker's readers enjoy its publication history of well-received articles on similar intellectual and cultural topics. So it's most likely its readers will be interested in this article. Even though the article is about 8 years old, the issue and Minkle's arguments still hold relevance today. So let's see, did I cover, I talked about the publication, right? I talked about the author quite well, and I talked about the audience. So far we've got our first sentence, right? We got our first sentence right here. Boom. We have our summary of our main claims right here. We have the context background stuff right here. Blue. And so we're pretty much all done. So now all we have to do is figure out what our thesis is, right? Before we started writing our thesis statement, we want to analyze some rhetorical devices she used and whether they were good or not, and whether they were effective and helped her make her main argument. So some of the ones that I came up with, if you can remember before, were things like this. I had these three, right? So then you would just put, so this one is Minkle is successful in presenting an argument because of her use of rhetorical questions, evidence, and humor. Maybe it's effective when she asks rhetorical questions and uses humor, but her confusing use of evidence keeps her argument from being wholly effective. All right, these are the things you could talk about. It's effective, it's partially effective, again, it's partially effective again here. And then all you would do is just, put it right at the end of your paragraph, boom, like that. And then we know that now the reader has some background. The reader knows who the author is and what article you are going to rhetorically analyze. They have some information about the article. And we know a little bit about, where it was printed. So that now your reader is informed enough to know what's going to happen and what they can look forward to. They are well prepared to understand what you will talk about. So think about it as like, give the reader enough information so they can follow you along in the rest of the essay. Assume they've never read the essay you're rhetorically analyzing. Give them enough information so they can know what's going to be, so they can follow along with your argument. And then we've read the thesis statement, and I've covered this before, but now we know that the first paragraph is going to talk about rhetorical questions. The second paragraph is going to talk about use of evidence, whether it was effective or not. And then we're going to have a paragraph on humor, and then we'll just go right to our conclusion after that. So that's essentially what you got to do. Here is everything that you need to know. Title, structure, here's filling in the structure with the content, and that's pretty much all you have to do. I think it's pretty straightforward. If you have questions, email me, use Canvas chat Monday, Wednesday, Friday from I think it's 11 to 12, or use Twitter. All right, have a good day.